Greetings, Kinesiology 247 World Sports and Games students. It's Jock, and our mini lecture today is about specific cultural constructs or paradigms that are conveyed in unique words. And I'm going to start in Sweden with the word lagom. And this was introduced to me by a student at Chico State who lived in Sweden for a semester and studied there. And he was just talking about how it was the perfect way to understand sort of the Swedish philosophy of having a balanced, happy life, a meaningful life. This article by Thomas Oppong highlights this concept of lagom, and it's the idea of slowing down and really being present. It's one of the reasons this philosophy that Sweden is thought to be one of the happiest countries in the world, and it's pronounced with an R actually, lagom. And I especially want to hone in on this idea of being just the right amount, not too much, not too little. It's the art of moderation. There's one more definition that I really like here. Yeah, not too little, not too much, just right. I might call that the Goldilocks concept. So let's see. I want to jump from here to a number of different words that are unique to languages. This one is, and I'm not going to try and pronounce these because I think I would butcher them. But this is a German one about somebody needing a punch in the face, or a face that needs to be punched, a face that badly needs a fist is how this translates. Another one here is a Bantu word. And we have the word for nightmare, and this is the opposite of that, like a really sweet and pleasant dream. Of course, I can't find the perfect word. Let's look a couple other ones here. Portuguese word, cafune. And this has to do with, and it shows the sensuality of Brazilian culture, tenderly running your fingers through your lover's hair. An Italian word about trying to revive an unworkable relationship, which literally translates to reheated cabbage, kind of like leftover salmon. Cotisuelto is a Caribbean Spanish word, and it's, you see how these guys have their shirts untucked and they're kind of, hip, but sort of informal. So there are a number of really cool words out there that you really have to get out of your own language to learn the sound, which I don't really have a word for in Samoan, famiti. There's a word in German, and it's not featured here, but it has to do with how things can fix themselves. Here's another one of just feeling so frustrated you can't function. You can see German has a lot of unique words. Here's a Filipino one, something that's so cute you just want to reach out and kind of squeeze it, pinch it. So I'm not going to go through all of these. This is a website that has 50 something of these different words. What I want to do is take you to the word of espresatura. This is kind of a cool one, an Inuit word for when you go to the door frequently to kind of expectantly look for someone who hasn't arrived yet. But back to espresatura, it's a word for casually being able to do really complicated things. And we are going to drop in on Danny Meyer, who is a world-renowned chef. And he has this life-changing experience. When he's 12 years old, he goes to Italy. He's grown up in St. Louis, and I'm going to let him tell the story. But the concept of espresatura is a great sort of cultural construct or paradigm that really has helped him become this incredible leader in the culinary world. So next up, Danny Meyer, espresatura.
Just before my 12th birthday, my dad, who was in the travel business back in St. Louis, found himself negotiating to lease 2 different hotels in Rome. The good news for me and my family was that his negotiations were taking place not only during our 2-week spring vacation, but also during my 12th birthday. That was the first time I ever went to Rome, and I remember on the actual day of my birthday having a 12-course pasta tasting dinner. It was a revelation to me, a complete revelation. Just the discovery of all these flavors and foods and people and places that I had never experienced growing up. The next day, my dad took us all to a famous old restaurant in Trastevere called Dameo Pataka. Immediately it hits me. The garlicky wafts of tomato sauce, the warm laughter around the tiny tables. All of my senses are suddenly awake because I've never seen a restaurant like this, and I've never had food like this. There was the pasta, of course, and the platters overflowing with artichokes. I had had artichokes back home in St. Louis, you know, the big round ones which my mom would sometimes boil to death, the leaves then dipped into melted butter. But I'd never seen these long artichokes, fried and smashed into carciofi alla Judea, and the roast baby lamb, a bacchio, with its odd cuts and tiny bones that are so succulent.
What a place and what a meal. Can you imagine sitting there at young Danny's table? What would most capture your attention? The smells? The tastes? The spectacle?
It's an entirely different world from what I know growing up in St. Louis. Back home, I'm used to the flavors of the American Midwest, the mellow experience of growing up there as a kid in the 1960s, a somewhat repetitive culinary experience. Think curbside burgers, frozen custard, St. Louis-style pizza topped with Provel cheese, which is basically a lot of different cheeses combined to the point where it doesn't really taste like cheese at all. But in Rome, everything tastes exactly as you'd hoped it would. And the food in Rome was the great discovery of my life. I would go on to visit Europe every few years as a kid, and now as often as possible as an adult. These early trips are filled with delight, which continues over the course of my travels. The delight is always connected to discovery. I've come to believe that this sense of discovery can be as nourishing as the food itself. But discovery means different things to different people. For some people, discovery is about seeing something unexpected. For others, it's about doing something that they didn't know they were capable of. In my case, the discovery is connected to things I get to taste. My passion for food is the doorway that connects me most deeply. Every time I taste something delicious, what fascinates me is who came up with the idea. What can I learn about it? What does it say about the people who made it? I'll never forget the first time I finally figured out that almost every Roman trattoria has the exact same pastas on the menu, and every one of them is related. There's the cacio e pepe, which is simply spaghetti with pecorino cheese, olive oil, and lots of black pepper. Then, by simply adding guanciale, the bacon that comes from the cheek of the pig, it becomes spaghetti alla gricia. Or, by adding eggs, that same exact recipe becomes spaghetti alla carbonara. And if you omit the eggs and add tomato sauce instead, you get spaghetti alla matriciana. 4 different pastas, all related. What impresses me isn't always the complexity of the idea. Sometimes it's the simplicity. Something that impacted me from a young age about Italy was the emphasis on ingredients. Great Italian cooks really cherish and respect their ingredients. A little olive oil and salt doesn't provide much disguise if the tomato itself isn't perfectly sun-ripened, or if the basil isn't fragrant. I remember a spaghetti alla carbonara, melanzane alla parmigiana, vongole veraci, the tiny clams that would open just as they were kissed by the garlic, olive oil, and spaghetti with which they were meant to marry. All so simple and unadorned. One of the things I discovered about myself in Rome that I prize wherever I find it is an Italian word called sprezzatura. Sprezzatura is what happens when the food or the painting or the athletic endeavor or the architecture comes across as having been effortless, and yet the quality belies that. In other words, you can dig into a bowl of pasta that is so amazing and makes you so happy, and you know how much work must have gone into it, and yet you look at that bowl of pasta and it appears to be effortless. That's sprezzatura. Today, that very ethos informs everything I do. How can this feel more timeless? How can the dining room be a little less designed, the dessert a little less composed? It's a mindset of being understated, pared back, letting the fundamentals shine. It's so easy to fall into the trap of believing that more is better. But whenever I find myself thinking that way, I try to remind myself of the simple bowls of pasta that I first discovered in Rome, and that little things can make all the difference.
What little things can you notice right now around you? Even if they seem familiar, can you see, hear, or feel them with real freshness? There can be so much joy to being a tourist wherever you are.
Thanks, Danny, and also the host of Meditative Story that you heard there at the end, Rohan Guntilake. And the reason I wanted to play those things for you is what I'm hoping to bring out is this idea of being an observer and really getting deeply into the details and trying to immerse ourselves from that etic perspective of being an outsider, or even the emic of being an insider. How can we see things from a fresh perspective? How can we observe culture in a way where we see things anew, where we are able to get beyond our own potential cultural blind spots and biases and just open up to a richer, broader way of being and seeing the world? So, I want to be able to translate these skills now into understanding sport and game. And where did these sports and games come from? What kinds of movements are featured? What are some of the gestures, the body language, the strategy, the assumptions, the ritual, the dress? There's so much to sport and game that embody culture and help us understand culture. So using food as another cultural element, or language, we are becoming more able to dive into cultures that maybe we're less familiar with, or go deeper on our own and see things in a broader light, see things in a more insightful way, and really understand that culture in a deeper, more holistic way. Thanks, everybody.